Hi, my name is Justin. Welcome to the Lovers Podcast. If you're new here, which you most likely are because this is the first episode, hi, I'm Justin. I run a Substack called the Lovers Media, and I've been wanting to expand it into a podcast for a little bit of a while now, but I've only recently gotten to it, so we'll see what happens. I'm 21. I live in New York, um, and I'm a writer. I write stuff. I have a book. I have a poetry book that I publish all by myself at the tender little age of 20. I don't mean this to be like a sales thing, like off the jump, but like here we are. I've been wanting to start the podcast for a while now. Um, it's supposed to go hand in hand with my Substack. My Substack is called The Lovers Media, and then I also have an Instagram page that's kind of revolving around the same idea, where I like curate an idea of love given what I'm able to find on the internet. That's kind of the general gist. And then also with that, I talk about my love life a lot and my relationship to love, my relationship to my body, relationships galore. Honestly, I have a relationship to everything, and I think other people do as well. Um, but we're all just trying to figure out what that relationship looks like, how we want it to be in our everyday lives, and also how we actually get there. You know what I mean? This first episode is called Nobody Cares. um, it's kind of, I like the fact that I named it Nobody Cares because it's the first episode of a podcast and a lot of people don't care. And I think that's really funny. But also, I meant it as a sort of double entendre. I wanted Nobody Cares to be this sort of idea talking about how in the culture nowadays there's this overarching idea that people don't care. And I don't like the fact that we as people are pretending not to care about things. So, with that being said, what's the main idea behind people pretending not to care? I think this entire sense of being an anti intellectual but also anti empathetic culture has gone really far. And I think the internet obviously has a big part to play there, but at the same time, I think people interacting with each other not being as common as, it used to be. I think as a culture, us not interacting with each other as much as we would have been doing, or like the past generations that have been here have done, there's this sense of you need to appeal to certain audiences in order to be cared about, right? There's no actual audience that, this is like hypothetical, obviously, but there's no actual audience in a lot of people's minds where their thoughts actually matter. And that's, I think, why people feel extremely comfortable saying the things they do online. And then I think it goes hand in hand with the idea of anti intellectualism. And I think with anti intellectualism, I think it goes hand in hand with anti empathy. The idea of anti intellectualism talks about how people are sort of against this idea of learning or trying to be above the need for like more information. I think the need for more information is actually extremely necessary, but a lot of people act against it for a lot of different reasons. And, everybody has their own reasons to certain things, right? But I was talking about in my Substack post that I titled Meaningless Communication. That's also a sort of double entendre. I don't know. I think I really like double entendres. I subheaded it Whatever Happened to Love Letters, right? This entire idea that I had about meaningless communication is we are just not communicating as much as a society as we used to. And it really sucks. um, but in this post, I can read some of it. I was helping my boyfriend with a scholarship letter and looked over to the toolbar where you can live message somebody on the same document. He texted me back on regular iMessage, and I responded that I only communicate through Google Docs. I like to have fun. After this back and forth ended, I felt a tinge of sadness about how we don't value communication nowadays anymore. You can say anything to anyone in any way, but the true soul of it is lost. Whatever happened to waiting until you see someone to update them on all that's happened in your life, or simply just emailing? Pagers were around for over 50 years. Surely there are means of communication that feel just as meaningful, if not more so. With the regret of sounding like one of those born in the wrong generation types of people, I wonder sometimes if we're better off not texting at all. And then don't get me wrong, I love the ease of use. It's so much more accessible, but I get bombarded by ads as much as I talk to my friends, scams as much as I get meaningful photos. In my sophomore year of college, I was in my linguistics class where my professor told us how deep communication truly goes. He once told us about a pen pal that he had all the way from Europe, and that he would write to them and he would wait for letters by the mailbox for. I also watched Past Lives recently, and I was bawling in the theater. I actually was crying out loud, and people heard me and were actually like laughing at me. It was kind of funny. But I thought the idea of the Skype conversations were so endearing, and there's no actual like difference between Skype and FaceTime. It's just one was more modern for the time, and one is also more modern for the time. You know what I mean? So Skype is not something that we're using nowadays, but it's still in our society enough where we can reference back to it. I think a lot of the means of communication that I find actually interesting and worth cherishing are the ones that we can actually look back on. So I know some older people will read this and reject my notions of wanting communication to be harder, but harder just means that there's more effort put behind it. Why would I turn up my nose at the idea of effort behind communication? When I was with my ex, I put a letter behind a picture in a frame of us together saying that if he found it, I owed him a coffee. And that part of me is speaking now and wonders how much we have to give up to go back to truly putting true, unadulterated effort behind our communications. So my mind kind of works in strange little ways. um, I think something that I like to do is leave little messages for people. Whether or not they find it is kind of not the point. It's kind of the fact that I know that I put forth that effort of doing a little note or something. Like for that example, it was a framed picture of me and my ex-boyfriend, and in the frame I like left a note that like if he found the note, I owed him a coffee. It didn't truly mean anything, and like I would owe him a coffee if he found it, but also he never found it. So it's one of those things that I like the idea of just putting effort behind your communications regardless of who you're talking to. And I think it's just more meaningful when you are talking to somebody and you put effort behind your communication. I think that's why love letters have existed for so long, because that was kind of the means of actually communicating with your loved ones. But now we can just send texts to each other, and it doesn't really mean as much, but it still is good to know that somebody was thinking about you, right? So that's the entire idea I have behind communication becoming meaningless. And I think that genuinely ties back to the fact that, like, people are trying not to care about what they actually want. And this entire mentality is so backwards to me because you don't have to refute something to say that you actually want it. You know what I mean? When people are saying, like, for example, you have to stop chasing love for it to come find you. Why do you have to not want it to actually get it? That just, it's never made any sense to me. Maybe somebody can shed some light on it. But I don't like the fact that as a society, we've kind of taken that mindset and applied it to everything, that we just stop caring about something and then it suddenly just shows up in our life miraculously as if it has no actual work needed to be put behind it. Um, Another example for this is like growing up, not to like be gifted child syndrome or whatever, but growing up, my family often told me that I was going to be like successful. I was going to be a doctor, whatever. I'm not a doctor. I'm doing a podcast right now about my love life. So, this entire idea behind, oh, like you're going to be this, you're going to be this, you're going to be this, and then it doesn't turn out how you actually want it. They kind of just assumed that I would end up being a doctor because I don't know, I said it when I was like in kindergarten, and honestly, as an adult, it's kind of your fault if you're taking anything kindergartners say to face value, or at face value rather. But I think that is just one of my little examples as to like how there's this expectation for things to just show up and not an actual reasoning or effort being put behind it to have these results. When my family was telling me that I was going to be a doctor, nobody was just like, oh, let me get him a medical set. Like, nobody was putting that idea in my mind. It was kind of just like, oh, yeah, like, he's smart. Like, he might as well just, like, be somebody who makes a lot of money saving people's lives and things like that. And while I love the idea, I could never do that. I don't want to be put in charge of somebody's life. That just sounds like a lot to me. But this segues into my next point that we as human beings are caring individuals. We are caring creatures. Humanity, we know how to care for things. That's kind of what we do, right? I think that honestly goes for anything in life by itself. I think all living things know how to care for one another in in a certain type of way. With this being said, as humans are caring creatures, we act against our nature to fit different narratives, right? So this entire idea behind humans being caring individuals and like a caring species, I'm under the impression, it's my belief system, that humans know how to love each other. And that's kind of all we inherently know how to do besides like breathe, right? I think humans inherently know how to love each other. However, I don't think that we all know how to do it in the correct ways that serve each other. And by that, I mean, I think everybody's capable of loving and having a loving mindset and wanting to be a loving individual. I think everybody wants love. However, doing it in a manner that serves you and also a person that you may want to be in a relationship with, that's where people get tripped up at. Like, I know that I love my friends and I love my parents, and obviously I love them in separate ways for different reasons, but I love them like regardless. I love my plants. I love animals, but I love them in different ways. I take care of them, but at the same time, I have to water a plant and I have to feed an animal. That's kind of like a very like bare bones difference of what I actually mean by what I'm talking about. But I think loving is inherent to being a human being. I think people know how to love first and foremost. It's just the actual loving it in the right way, what you're trying to love, anyways. Gay people. I'm gay. I like boys. I date. I kiss boys on the occasion, and I think with that, I've been in two relationships so far, long term, and we all have had to learn how to love each other. Like I had to learn how to love my ex boyfriends the same way they had to learn how to love me, and it was like working enough until it wasn't, and that's okay. People break up all the time, and especially since I'm 21, I'm in college. Like people break up, people love all the time, people have sex, people do everything all the fucking time. So that's why I also don't. I've never taken a breakup like seriously. I don't know if that like makes me sound like a terrible fucking person. But I've never taken a breakup or like a relationship itself really seriously at this point in time because we're all just kind of figuring out how to be alive, and since being a loving individual is somewhat inherent to me, I also have the capacity to let it go when I feel like I need to let it go. I'm not somebody who's going to hold on to something for as long as possible until the wheels fall off because I don't think that's love anymore. I think that shifts into something different. You can love somebody for so long until it becomes like you end up resenting them because of the things that you wish they were, or who you wish they were, or like who you wanted them to be, who they couldn't be for you. And that was actually the reason why I ended my first relationship. I think we were growing in just different ways so deeply and so profoundly that if we stayed together, we'd end up resenting each other because we didn't have the same outlook on how we wanted our relationship to actually go. Um, yeah, and that's essentially my like entire thought process philosophy behind nobody cares. I think everybody fucking cares. I'm just gonna say it. Like everybody cares about like something. The only issue is what narrative are they trying to fulfill in their head, and also are they doing it out of a place of being genuine, like they genuinely don't care about something, or are they trying to, fit a narrative? Are they trying to get a reaction of some sort of way? And then this idea of pretending not to care in modern dating generally is a nightmare. I think it's the worst thing ever because people treat others like they're disposable, and that's really fucked up. I have like three friends right now who are going through the same thing of being ghosted by their not even partners, but just people that they were talking to romantically. Having people that you're talking to romantically and just like ghosting them, that's a lot. And it doesn't make people feel good, obviously. And so I think this idea of pretending not to care, or like not caring or being nonchalant when it comes to dating in the real life and in modern dating, a lot of people don't even know what the fuck you're doing, honestly. A lot of people just kind of follow what they feel like they need to follow, and if you're not in that equation, then sadly you're just not in it. Yeah, like not to say that it's like a good or bad thing. I think ghosting is reasonable to a certain extent. I don't think you should just ghost anybody if you just feel like it. You should obviously let people know how you feel before you exit their lives and after you had a romantic and intimate like moment with them, be it sex or just like a really good date. Regardless, I think you should let people know about how you're feeling and keep people up to date. But I think with this entire idea that we are not caring as individuals who are dating right now, I think that's what makes people really scared to open themselves up. I had this like revelation back when I was around like 16, 17, that I'd have to keep opening myself up back to people. And that kind of threw me for a loop because I was just like, you have to do this over and over and over again. And you have no control over it besides, like, are you going to be an open person who receives love or not? And I think generally speaking, the ends justify the means of opening yourself back up romantically to the dating sphere, especially nowadays. I think with this, the lack of communion that we have as a society is something that kind of fits into that because we're at a loss for a third place. Obviously, capitalism is at an all time peak. Nobody has like time to even see their friends, families, and like loved ones as often as they'd want to. And I think with that, everybody's just increasingly lonely, and people are just trying to fill a void in any way that they can. But there's not always going to be somebody who can fill that void for you, and there's not always going to be a way that you can do it. A lot of people's coping mechanisms are, buying things. That used to be my thing. Not anymore. I'm fucking poor now. Or, having sex with people to kind of fill that void that they have within themselves. But you cannot ultimately fill the void alone. You can't fill it by doing, cheap exercises in romance. You can't do it by going on a date with somebody just to say that you want to date, and you can't do it by over romanticizing who people may or may not be in your head. There's a lot that goes into um, actual fostering of relationships, and it takes a lot to show people that you actually care. And I think the effort is worth putting in. I don't think it's worthless at all. I don't think it's worthless to care about people or to care what people say or care how people feel. And I'm a person who's always going to care how people feel. I, I choose empathy first and foremost. So that's, I don't even choose it. It's kind of just what comes naturally to me, and I think it comes naturally to most people. However, a lot of people are taught how to shut it off, turn it back on. And yeah, that's the essential idea. This is just like kind of an introductory episode into the podcast. I don't know if episodes will be any longer than this, if they'll be like shorter than this. But yet again, my name is Justin. This is the Lovers Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. This is editing Justin. The outro was so fucking bad. I'm so sorry. Um All the links to all of my things in the description, like, actually buy. Like, it was worse than that. Like, okay, bye.